I had exactly one lunch in my bag and $8 to my name when I handed that meal to a stranger on a freezing bus bench. He stared at me with ancient familiarity, whispering that I looked frighteningly like my mother. 3 weeks later, a thick envelope hit my doorstep containing a court summons and a note congratulating me on reclaiming what was stolen. Suddenly, the relatives who called me a leech looked at me with pure terror. My name is Paisley Flores, and until 20 minutes ago, the most terrifying thing in my life was the prospect of failing my intermediate financial reporting exam for the third time. I am 29 years old. I work the graveyard shift stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store on the edge of town, and during the day, I try to force complex accounting principles into a brain that is running on 4 hours of sleep and cheap instant coffee. I live in a world of fluorescent lights, expiration dates, and the constant, gnawing anxiety that I am one missed paycheck away from sleeping in my car. I thought I knew what stress looked like. I thought I knew what fear felt like. I was wrong. Fear is not a past due notice. Fear is standing in the hallway of my crumbling apartment complex, wearing oversized sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, staring at two men who look like they cost more by the hour than I earn in a year. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp carpet, a permanent scent that clung to the walls of the building. The man on the left was a courier, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clutching a clipboard like a shield. The man on the right was different. He was stillness personified. He wore a charcoal suit that absorbed the dim hallway light, and his shoes were polished to a mirror shine that reflected the grime of my floor mat. He looked at me not with judgment, but with a clinical, terrifying focus. "Paisley Flores?" the suit asked. His voice was smooth, a baritone that carried easily over the sound of my neighbor's barking terrier. "Yes," I said, my hand instinctively tightening on the doorframe. My first thought was Gordon. My stepfather had a habit of running up debts and listing me as a secondary contact. If this was a collection agency, they had upgraded their wardrobe significantly. "Look, if this is about the cable bill, I already called the service center and told them the payment is posting on Friday." The man did not blink. "I am not here about a cable bill. Ms. Flores, my name is Arthur Vance. I represent the legal firm of Ward and Crow." He nodded to the courier. The younger man thrust a thick envelope toward me. It was heavy, creamy paper, the kind that feels like fabric between your fingers. A red wax seal sat on the back, broken but still intimidating. "You have been served with a formal notice regarding the execution of the Caldwell Family Trust," Vance said. The air left my lungs. Caldwell. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in 5 years, not since my mother died. In the house where I grew up, under the roof of Gordon Bale and his new wife Maris, the name Caldwell was treated like a curse word. It was the name my mother carried before she married my father. And then Gordon. It was the name of the family that had supposedly cast her out. The rich, heartless dynasty that let her die in a county hospital while they sat on a mountain of old money somewhere in New York. We were forbidden to speak it. Gordon claimed it brought bad luck. I suspected it just bruised his fragile ego to be reminded that his wife came from a world he could never touch. "There must be a mistake," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "I don't have anything to do with the Caldwells. My mother was disowned. There is no trust." Vance watched me, his expression unreadable. "There is no mistake. The primary grantor has initiated a living will protocol. You are named as a presumptive beneficiary." He paused, checking a slim silver watch on his wrist. "You are required to attend a reading and introductory meeting at our offices in the city center. The time is set for 2 o'clock this afternoon." 2 o'clock? I laughed. A sharp, hysterical sound. "I have a shift tonight. I have to study. I can't just—" "Ms. Flores," Vance interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, becoming hard as granite. "Read the summons. If you are absent from this meeting, your claim is forfeited. Every asset, every liquid holding, and every property title designated to your line will transfer immediately to the secondary beneficiaries named in the contingency clause." He leaned in slightly, invading my personal space just enough to make my heart hammer against my ribs. And judging by the frantic phone calls my office has received from a Mr. Gordon Bale and a Mrs. Maris Bale this morning, I suggest you do not let that happen. The mention of them was like a splash of ice water. Gordon and Maris knew. They called the firm. I looked down at the document in my hands. The red stamp at the top did not say overdue. It said urgent beneficiary summons. And right below that, signed in a shaky but commanding hand, was the name of the grantor. Harlan Caldwell, my grandfather, the man I had never met, the monster in Gordon's bedtime stories. The hallway seemed to spin. I leaned back against the door, the heavy paper crushing in my grip. How was this happening? Why now? Why me? The girl who counts pennies at the gas station to see if she can afford a gallon of milk. Vance seemed to sense my disorientation. He didn't step back, but his posture softened by a fraction. 3 weeks ago, he said, shifting the topic so abruptly I blinked. You were at the Gray Line station. Do you remember? The question pulled me out of the hallway and threw me backward in time. 3 weeks ago, it was a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that makes you question every life choice that led you to that moment. I had been coming back from a failed job interview in the next county over a junior bookkeeper position I was perfectly qualified for, but didn't get because my clothes looked secondhand and my car had broken down. Forcing me to take the bus, the Gray Line station was a purgatory of concrete and diesel fumes. The heating system was broken, and the air inside was colder than the air outside. I was sitting on a metal bench that seemed designed to inflict back pain, shivering in my thin coat, hugging my backpack to my chest. I had exactly $8 in my wallet. My bank account was overdrawn by $12. I had not eaten since breakfast the day before. In my backpack, I had a plastic container. Inside was my lunch and my dinner. It was leftovers from the deli section of the supermarket where I worked, marked down because it was nearing expiration. Pasta with a questionable cream sauce. It wasn't much, but my stomach was cramping so hard it felt like a feast. I had just popped the lid, the smell of cold garlic and cheese wafting up. When I felt eyes on me, I looked to my right. Sitting 2 seats away was an old man. He didn't look like the usual clientele of the Gray Line. He wasn't muttering to himself or asking for cigarettes. He was dressed in a simple, heavy wool coat that looked old but well made. He wore a flat cap pulled low, but he was shaking. His hands, resting on his knees, were trembling with a violence that rattled the fabric of his trousers. His lips were a pale shade of blue. He was staring at the vending machine across the aisle. The machine glowed with the promise of candy bars and sodas, but the red light indicating out of order was blinking rhythmically. He looked at the machine, then at his hands, then at me. Miss, his voice was a rasp, dry as dead leaves. I don't suppose you have any water? He didn't ask for money. He didn't give a sob story. He just asked for water with a dignity that broke my heart. I looked at my water bottle. It was half full. Then I looked at him again. The shaking wasn't just cold. I had seen enough diabetic episodes at the store to recognize the signs of crashing blood sugar. He was fading. I have water, I said. I handed him the bottle. He took it with shaking hands. Struggling to unscrew the cap, I reached over, twisted it open for him, and watched him drink. He finished it in 3 gulps. It wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough. I looked down at my pasta. My stomach gave a loud, treacherous growl. I was so hungry I felt lightheaded. That food was my fuel for the double shift I had scheduled for the next day. If I gave it away, I wouldn't eat until Thursday morning. I looked at the old man. He had lowered the bottle and was wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. He looked exhausted, brittle, like a strong wind would shatter him. I didn't think. If I thought about it, I would have kept the food. I just acted on the instinct that had gotten me in trouble my whole life. Here, I said, sliding the plastic container across the empty seat between us. It's cold, but it's got carbs. You look like you need it more than I do. The old man froze. He looked at the cheap plastic container, then up at my face. His eyes were a startling, piercing gray, the only sharp thing about him. You're hungry, he observed. It wasn't a question. I'm fine, I lied. I had a big breakfast. He held my gaze for a long, uncomfortable second. Then, slowly, he picked up the plastic fork I had rested on the lid. He ate. He didn't wolf it down. He ate methodically, as if respecting the food. When he was finished, the trembling in his hands had stopped. The color was returning to his cheeks. He placed the empty container down and turned to me fully. "You have a habit of giving up your share," he said softly. "You have the look of someone who apologizes for taking up space." I frowned. Defensive. "I'm just being polite." "No," he corrected. "You are being sacrificial. You are exactly like a woman I once knew, a woman I hurt very deeply because I was too proud to see her worth." I didn't know what to say to that. I just shrugged, feeling the cold seep into my bones. "Well, don't worry about it. Glad you're feeling better." He reached into his pocket then. I thought he was going to offer me $1 or $2, and I prepared to refuse. But instead, he pulled out a small, round object. It looked like a coin, but it was made of a dark, heavy metal. He pressed it into my palm. "Don't sell this," he whispered. "Keep it safe." Then, he stood up. He moved with surprising strength for someone who had been shaking minutes ago. "Thank you for the lunch, child. You have no idea what you just started." And he walked away, disappearing into the gray fog of the bus station platform. Back in the hallway, the memory faded, replaced by the sterile presence of Arthur Vance. "You met him," Vance said. "You met Harlan Caldwell." I stared at the lawyer, the old man on the bench. The billionaire recluse was riding a Greyhound bus and eating 3-day-old pasta. "That's impossible," I whispered. He looked. He looked like a man who wanted to see if anyone would see him, not his money, Vance finished. "And you were the only one who did." Suddenly, the phone in my pocket began to vibrate against my thigh. It was a violent, continuous buzz that demanded attention. I pulled it out. The screen was cracked, but the notification was clear. "Sender Maris. Text. Where the hell are you? Gordon says lawyers are involved. If you get anything, do not sign it. You don't understand what you're doing. Stay put. We are coming over." My thumb hovered over the screen. Maris never texted me unless she needed a chore done or wanted to remind me how much I owed them for raising me. This text was different. It wasn't angry. It was panicked. It was the text of someone watching a dam break. "They know," I said, looking up at Vance. "My family. They know about the meeting. They were informed that the trust activation affects their standing," Vance said coolly. "They are displeased." I looked at the message again. "We are coming over. For years." I had been afraid of Gordon and Maris, afraid of their shouting, afraid of their financial control, afraid of being thrown out. But reading that text, seeing the sheer desperation in the capital letters, something clicked in my brain. They weren't coming over to protect me. They were coming over because they were terrified. This document wasn't just a potential inheritance, it was a weapon. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the gun. "I'll be there," I said to Vance. 2:00. Vance nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out one last item. It was a small, cream-colored envelope, much smaller than the first. "Mr. Caldwell gave me specific instructions regarding this," Vance said. "He told me to give it to you only after you accepted the summons. He said it was a reimbursement." "Reimbursement?" I asked. "He said he owes you for lunch." Vance turned and walked toward the elevator, his shoes clicking on the linoleum, leaving me standing in the dim hallway with a trembling courier and 2 envelopes that weighed more than my entire life. I opened the small envelope. Inside, there was no check. There was no cash. There was only a single, folded piece of stationery. I unfolded it. It wasn't money. It was a receipt from a pawn shop, dated 5 years ago. And stapled to it was a Polaroid photo of a necklace, a silver locket shaped like a tear. One I had cried over for months when it vanished from my room the week after my mother died. Gordon had sworn he never saw it. He said I must have lost it because I was irresponsible. But here was the receipt, signed by Gordon Bale, and below the photo, in the same shaky handwriting as the legal document, was a note. "Congratulations. You have just been returned what was stolen. You just have to show up on time to claim the rest." To understand why a pawnshop receipt for a silver locket made my knees buckle in that hallway, you have to understand the silence that fell over my life 5 years ago. It started the day my mother, Elena, took her last breath. She died on a rainy Tuesday in November, succumbing to a sickness that had eaten away at her savings and her spirit in equal measure. But the real erasure began the moment the funeral guests left. It was as if Gordon Bale, the man she had married 3 years prior, had been waiting for the ambulance to pull away so he could hit a reset button on our existence. We lived in Ashford Ridge, Ohio, a town that prides itself on manicured lawns and quiet neighbors. Our house was a sprawling 2-story affair that Gordon liked to call his estate. To me, it was a museum where I was the only exhibit that didn't belong. Within a week of the funeral, every photo of my mother was gone from the mantelpiece. Her coats were cleared from the hall closet. Her smell, that faint trace of lavender and old paper, was scrubbed away with industrial lemon cleaner. Gordon married Maris less than 6 months later. He called it moving forward. I called it an eviction of the soul. I was 24 years old then, just finishing my undergraduate degree and drowning in student loans that Gordon refused to help with, despite controlling the accounts my mother had left behind. "I am keeping a roof over your head, Paisley," Gordon would say, sitting in his leather armchair like a king on a throne. "That is humanitarian aid. Do not ask for luxury." Luxury, in Gordon's dictionary, included things like heat in the winter, internet access for my studies, and food that wasn't nearing its expiration date. He developed a system. He loved systems. He called it the contribution ledger. Every item I consumed was tallied. A shower longer than 5 minutes, 50 cents. Use of the washing machine, $2 per load. A ride to the train station. That was a billable service, calculated at the federal mileage rate plus a convenience fee. I wasn't a stepdaughter. I was a tenant with bad credit. "You need to learn the value of $1. Maris would chime in. Maris was a woman who looked like she was made of porcelain and wire hard, sharp and cold. She had moved into the house and immediately claimed the master bedroom, redecorating it in shades of beige that looked like sand. "Gordon is too generous with you. Most men would have kicked an adult stepchild out on the street." But they didn't kick me out. That was the trick. They needed me there. I was the built-in maid, the gardener, and the scapegoat for every misplaced item or speck of dust. The center of my torment was the study. It was a room on the ground floor with heavy oak doors that were always locked. That was where Gordon kept important papers. I knew, with a gut-deep certainty, that my mother's personal effects, her journals, her letters, her jewelry, and whatever legal documents she had possessed were in that room. It was a cemetery with a keypad lock. One evening, about a year after Maris moved in, Gordon called me into the kitchen. He had a document spread out on the granite counter. "This is just a formality," Gordon said, uncapping a pen. He didn't look at me. He was busy pouring himself a glass of expensive red wine. "Since you are living here as an adult dependent, we need to restructure the liability. This document states that you agree to contribute a fixed percentage of your future income to the household to repay the debts you are incurring now." "I'm paying you rent," I said, my voice quiet. I was working 2 waitressing jobs at the time. "I pay you $600 a month for a room with no heat vent. And that barely covers the property taxes," Maris snapped from the living room. "Just sign it, Paisley," Gordon said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, reasonable tone that meant he was losing patience. "It also simplifies things. It gives me power of attorney to handle any lingering issues with your mother's estate, so you don't have to be burdened by the legal nonsense. You want to focus on your little accounting classes, don't you?" I was tired. I was grieving. And I was terrified of being homeless. I picked up the pen. The legal jargon was dense. Paragraphs of text about waiving rights and asset consolidation that my tired brain couldn't parse. I trusted that, despite everything, he wouldn't outright rob me. He was my stepfather. He had held my mother's hand when she died. I signed away my voice. The true nature of my position in the Bale household became crystal clear during dinner parties. Gordon loved to host. He loved to show off the house, the wine cellar, and his happy family. I remember one night specifically. It was a humid July evening. Gordon had invited the local Rotary Club board members. The dining room table was set with the good china, my mother's china. Actually, though Maris claimed she had bought it at an auction, they sat at the long mahogany table, laughing, clinking crystal glasses, cutting into a prime rib that smelled of rosemary and garlic. I was not at the table. I was standing at the kitchen island, separated from the dining room by an open archway. My dinner was on a paper plate, the end cut of the beef, mostly fat, and a scoop of cold potatoes. I was not forbidden from the table explicitly, but the seating arrangement had been made clear. "There aren't enough chairs," Maris had said, smiling tight, "and someone needs to be ready to clear the plates." I stood there, eating in silence, invisible in my own home. "So, Gordon," a man with a booming voice said, "what is the plan for that old property on Elm Street, the one your late wife owned?" I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. That was the house where I was born, the house my mother had kept even after marrying Gordon, saying it was her safety net. "Oh, we are liquidating it," Gordon said smoothly. "It is a drain on resources. We are going to reinvest the capital into something more forward-thinking. Maris has a wonderful vision for a vacation rental in Florida." "Is that complicated?" "With the probate?" the guest asked. "Not at all," Gordon chuckled. "We have streamlined everything, family agreement." He said it so casually. He was selling my childhood home to buy a beach house for the woman who erased my mother, and he was using the document I signed to do it. I looked up and caught the eye of the only person in the room who seemed to notice I was alive. Landon Bale. Landon was Gordon's son from his first marriage. He was 26, handsome in a lazy, unkempt way, with dark hair that always fell into his eyes. He sat at the end of the table, nursing a beer instead of wine. He wasn't like Gordon. He didn't seem to get off on power, but he wasn't brave either. He was a survivor of Gordon's bullying, just like me. But his survival strategy was compliance and silence. Landon looked at me standing at the island with my paper plate. He looked at his father, then back at me. His expression was a mix of pity and guilt. He knew this was wrong. He knew they were stripping the meat off my bones, but he didn't say a word. He just looked down and took a sip of his beer. He wasn't evil, but in that house, his silence was a weapon. The breaking point didn't come with the house sale. It came with the newspaper. I was cleaning the living room, picking up the local gazette that Gordon had left on the floor. A headline on page 4 caught my eye. "Local philanthropist launches new initiative." There was a picture of Gordon, smiling his benevolent smile, shaking hands with the mayor. The caption read, "Gordon Bale establishes the Elena Flores Memorial Fund to support underprivileged youth." My breath hitched. He was using her name. I read the article. It described Gordon as the devoted widower who wanted to honor his late wife's legacy. It mentioned a gala. It mentioned donations. I knew, with the instinct of an accountant in training, exactly what this was. It wasn't charity. It was a tax shelter. He was using my mother's name to wash money and buy social capital in Ashford Ridge. He was wearing her memory like a costume to impress his friends, while simultaneously selling off everything she actually loved. I felt a heat rise in my chest that was different from the usual shame. It was pure, white-hot rage. I waited until they went out for dinner that Friday. I packed 2 suitcases. That was it. That was all I had that didn't belong to the house. I took my textbooks, my few clothes, and the one photo of my mother I had managed to hide under my mattress. When Gordon came home and found me by the door, he didn't yell. He laughed. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, checking his watch. "You have chores." "I'm leaving," I said. "I'm done paying you to abuse me." Gordon stepped closer, looming over me. "You walk out that door, Paisley, and the bank of Gordon is closed. You understand? No references, no support. You will be nothing." "I'm already nothing here," I said. "Fine," he sneered. "Go." But don't come crawling back when you starve. And you will starve. You have your mother's weak spine. I walked out. I didn't look back. But Gordon was right about one thing: the world outside was expensive. I moved into a studio apartment above a laundromat on the bad side of town. The rent took 70% of my income from the grocery store. The rest went to tuition for my CPA certification. I was determined to finish. I was determined to have a credential that Gordon couldn't touch, but the math didn't work. First, the car broke down, a $600 repair. Then, my hours at the store got cut because of a corporate restructuring. I entered what I now call the hunger. It wasn't the romanticized poverty you see in movies where the protagonist eats ramen and laughs. It was a grinding, gray reality. It was sleeping in a coat because I couldn't afford to turn on the radiator. It was walking 3 miles to work because I didn't have bus fare. It was the physical pain of a stomach digesting itself. I stopped buying fresh food. Then I stopped buying canned food. I started living on the expired items the store threw out, sneaking them into my bag before the manager could lock the dumpster. I became a ghost in my own life. I went to work. I studied until my eyes burned, and I counted every penny. And that brings us to 3 weeks ago. I had hit rock bottom. I had paid my tuition, leaving my account at exactly zero. I had a job interview for a better position, a bookkeeping role that would have saved me. I spent my last $8 on a bus ticket to get there. I didn't get the job. The interviewer looked at my fraying cuffs and my tired eyes and decided I wasn't corporate material. I sat on that bench at the Gray Line station, defeated. I was 29 years old. I was smart. I was hardworking. And I was starving. I had that one plastic container of pasta. It was my lifeline. It was the only thing standing between me and passing out. And then I saw the old man. He looked the way I felt, hollowed out by the cold. When he asked for water, I saw my own desperation reflected in his eyes. Gordon had taught me that the world was a zero-sum game. If you give, you lose. Maris had taught me that kindness was a weakness to be exploited. But looking at that old man's shaking hands, I heard my mother's voice. We don't give because we have plenty. Paisley, we give because we know what it's like to have nothing. So I gave him the lunch. I didn't know then that the pasta was a key. I didn't know the old man was a lock. I just knew that I was hungry. But he was shaking, and I couldn't be Gordon Bale. I had to be Elena Flores's daughter. I walked home that night in the freezing rain, my stomach cramping, feeling like a fool. But standing in my hallway now, holding the receipt for the locket Gordon had sworn was lost, I realized something. The hunger hadn't killed me. It had prepared me, and now I was ready to eat. The cold at the Gray Line station was not just a weather condition. It was a physical assault. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, and the heating system in the terminal had been broken since the Reagan administration. The air inside smelled of diesel exhaust, stale coffee, and the damp wool of too many wet coats. I sat on a metal bench that seemed designed by someone who hated the human spine, my arms wrapped tight around my torso, trying to conserve whatever body heat I had left. I had exactly 1 box of lunch in my bag and $8 in my wallet. The lunch was a plastic container of creamy garlic pasta with wilted spinach, purchased from the clearance rack at work for $1.50. It was cold. It was congealed. But to me, sitting there with a stomach that felt like it was digesting its own lining, it was a 5-star meal. I had been saving it for 3 hours, bargaining with myself, telling myself to wait until I got home so I could at least heat it up, but the bus was delayed by 40 minutes, and my willpower was eroding with every rumble of my empty belly. I pulled the container out of my canvas tote bag. The lid popped with a sharp snap that echoed in the quiet corner of the waiting area. I stared at the pasta. I could smell the garlic, sharp and artificial, and my mouth watered so painfully it almost brought tears to my eyes. That was when I noticed him. He was sitting 2 benches away, facing the vending machine. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 70s, wearing a wool coat that was a nondescript shade of charcoal. It was a good coat, thick and well cut, but it looked worn, as if he had been living in it for days. He wore a flat cap pulled low over his forehead, obscuring his eyes. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at the vending machine. The machine was a brightly lit monolith of snacks, honey buns, potato chips, chocolate bars, but the digital display read "out of order" in scrolling red letters. The man's hands were resting on his knees. They were shaking. It wasn't a shivering tremor from the cold. It was the rhythmic, uncontrollable rattling of a body in crisis. I watched his fingers twitch against the dark fabric of his trousers. I worked in a grocery store. I saw people from all walks of life. I knew the look of an addict needing a fix, and I knew the look of a drunk coming down. This was neither. This was medical. He turned his head slowly and looked at me. His face was pale, the skin papery and translucent, his lips a frightening shade of violet. "Miss," his voice was a whisper, dry as dust. It didn't have the whine of a panhandler. It had a strange, clipped dignity to it, like a man who hated asking for directions even when he was lost. "Yes," I asked, my hand instinctively covering my pasta container. "I don't suppose," he paused, taking a shallow breath. "You have any water?" My throat is quite dry. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for the food. He just wanted water. I looked at the water bottle in the side pocket of my bag. It was half full. It was tap water from the bathroom sink at the interview I had just bombed. "Yeah," I said. "I have water." I stood up and walked the few steps over to him. Up close, he looked even worse. There was a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead despite the freezing temperature. I uncapped the bottle and handed it to him. His hand shook so badly he couldn't grip the plastic. The bottle slipped, splashing a little water onto his coat. He let out a frustrated noise, a sharp hiss of shame. "Here," I said, my voice softening. "Let me help." I guided the bottle to his lips. He drank greedily, the water spilling down his chin. He finished it in seconds and leaned back against the hard bench, closing his eyes. "Thank you," he breathed. "You're okay," I said. I hesitated, then turned to go back to my seat, but I stopped. The shaking hadn't stopped. If anything, it was getting worse. His eyes were closed, but his eyelids were fluttering. I knew that look. My manager at the store, Dave, was a diabetic. I had seen him crash once in the stockroom. He had looked exactly like this, pale, sweaty, shaking. He needed sugar. He needed carbs. I looked at my pasta. It was my dinner. It was my breakfast for tomorrow. It was the only thing standing between me and the gnawing hunger that made it hard to focus on my accounting textbooks. If I gave it away, I would go to bed hungry. I would wake up hungry. I would go to my shift hungry. I looked at the old man. He looked like he might not wake up at all. Gordon Bale, my stepfather, would have walked away. He would have said, "Not my problem. Let the state handle it." Maris would have said. He probably brought it on himself. But I wasn't a Bale. I was Paisley Flores. I walked back to my bench, picked up the plastic container and the plastic fork, and returned to him. "Sir," I said. He opened his eyes. They were gray, sharp, and startlingly clear amidst the pallor of his face. "You need to eat," I said, holding out the container. "It's garlic pasta. It's got carbs. It'll help the shaking." He looked at the cheap plastic bowl as if I were offering him a diamond. Then he looked at me. He seemed to be calculating something, measuring me. "That is your dinner," he said. "I had a big lunch." I lied. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. "I'm not hungry." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. He knew I was lying, and he knew why. "Take it," I insisted, pushing it into his hand. "Please, before it gets any colder." He took the bowl. He ate slowly, with a deliberate, disciplined motion. Despite the tremors in his hands, he didn't shovel the food in like a starving man. He ate it like a gentleman dining at a high table. I sat next to him, watching the cars pass by the station window, trying to ignore the hollow cramping in my own stomach. After about 10 minutes, he finished. He set the empty container down on the bench between us. The color had returned to his cheeks. The violent shaking had subsided to a minor tremor. "That was," he said, clearing his throat. The finest meal I have had in a very long time. I chuckled. A dry sound. It's day-old deli pasta, but I'm glad it helped. He turned his body toward me. The intensity of his gaze was unnerving. He wasn't looking at me like a stranger on a bus bench. He was looking at me like he was reading a file. You have a habit of giving up your portion, he said quietly. You sit there, hungry, and you give your food to a useless old man. You were shaking, I said, shrugging. It's just food. It is not just food, he corrected me. His voice hardened slightly. It is survival, and you surrendered it. He reached into the deep pocket of his wool coat. You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago. She had that same foolish, reckless kindness. She would give you the coat off her back and apologize that it wasn't warmer. I stiffened. She sounds like a nice lady. She was, he said. The regret in his voice was so heavy it felt physical. And I punished her for it. I thought kindness was weakness. I thought she needed to be toughened up. So I let the world break her, thinking she would come back to me when she had learned her lesson. He looked down at his hands. She never came back. I didn't know what to say. This was too heavy for a bus station conversation. I shifted uncomfortably. Well, I said, standing up. My bus is coming in 5 minutes. Wait, he said. He held out his hand. In his palm sat a small, round object. It looked like a coin, but it wasn't currency. It was a disc of dark, matte metal, heavy and cold. On one side, there was no face, no date, just a deeply engraved letter, a stylized C intertwined with a compass needle. Take this, he said. I can't take your money, I said, stepping back. It is not money, he said. It is a reminder of a debt. He took my hand and pressed the metal disc into my palm. His skin was rough, calloused, but his grip was surprisingly strong. Do not sell it, he commanded. No matter how hungry you get, do not sell it. Okay, I said, just wanting to end the interaction. I won't. He didn't let go of my hand. He leaned in closer, and his eyes searched my face, scanning my features with a desperate hunger. You wear your hair like her, he whispered, and you have her habit of tapping your thumb against your middle finger when you are nervous. I froze. My thumb was currently tapping against my middle finger. It was a tic I had had since childhood. My mother used to do it. She told me it was our secret signal that we were thinking hard. How? I started, my voice catching. How did you know that? He ignored the question. And you smell like vanilla and cheap soap, he said. But it wasn't an insult. Just like she did when she was trying to hide the fact that she couldn't afford perfume. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down my spine. My mother never wore perfume. She used vanilla extract behind her ears because it was cheaper. It was a secret she only shared with me. Who are you? I demanded, pulling my hand away. The metal disc felt hot against my skin. Do you know my family? Did Gordon send you? The old man stood up. He seemed taller now, the frailty of the hypoglycemic episode gone, replaced by a rigid, steel-like posture. Your family. He let out a short, bitter laugh. My dear child, you just did the one thing your family should have done for you years ago. You showed mercy. He adjusted his cap, turning his collar up against the wind. Who are you? I asked again, louder this time. He looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw a profound, crushing sadness in those gray eyes. I am a man who is too late, he said, and then he turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He walked toward the exit of the station, his steps steady, disappearing into the shadows of the parking lot as if he had never been there. I stood there for a long time, clutching the heavy metal disc, until the speaker crackled overhead announcing the arrival of the number 42 bus. That night, back in my drafty apartment, I couldn't sleep. The hunger was back, a dull ache in my midsection, but my mind was racing too fast to notice. I sat on my mattress, the metal disc sitting in the circle of light from my desk lamp, It was heavy for its size. Titanium, maybe, or platinum. The C engraved on it was precise, machine cut. It looked corporate. It looked expensive. I pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked spiderweb style across the top right corner, but it still worked. I opened the browser and typed in company logo letter C, compass needle. Thousands of results. I scrolled for 20 minutes. Nothing matched. Then I tried describing the man. Old man, gray eyes, wealthy industrialist, lost daughter. Too vague. I went back to the coin. I looked closer. Under the C, in tiny, almost microscopic letters, was a serial number. I typed the serial number into the search bar along with the word token. One result came up. It was an image from an archived auction site for rare corporate memorabilia. Item Executive Service Medallion. Origin Caldwell Meridian Group. Issued to board members only. Circa 1990. Caldwell. I dropped the phone on the mattress. Caldwell was my mother's maiden name. The name Gordon had forbidden us to speak, the name of the family that had supposedly cut her off without a penny. I picked up the coin again. The Caldwell Meridian Group. I quickly searched the company name. It was a massive holding company real estate, shipping, tech infrastructure, the kind of company that owns the companies you have heard of. The CEO and founder was listed as Harlan Caldwell. I clicked on images of Harlan Caldwell. There were very few. Most were from 30 years ago. He was a younger man then, sharp-jawed, terrifying. But the eyes, the gray, piercing eyes were the same. I stared at the photo, the man at the bus station, the man I had given my $1.50 pasta to. It was impossible. Harlan Caldwell was a billionaire. He didn't ride buses. He didn't nearly pass out from hunger in a public terminal. He lived in a fortress in New York, or a private island. It's a coincidence, I whispered to the empty room. He's just some crazy old guy who worked for them once. He stole the coin. That's why he has it. But the vanilla, the thumb tapping. I fell asleep clutching the coin. My dreams filled with gray eyes and the smell of garlic. The next 2 days were a blur of paranoia. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, but the feeling of being watched made the hair on my arms stand up. On Thursday, I was leaving the grocery store after my shift. It was 5 a.m. The parking lot was empty, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the streetlights. Except it wasn't empty. A black sedan was parked 3 rows back. It wasn't a police car. It was sleek, modern, with tinted windows that absorbed the light. I walked to my beat-up Honda Civic. The black car didn't move. I got in, locked the doors, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw the black car pull out and follow. It stayed 2 car lengths behind me for 3 miles, then turned off just before I reached my apartment complex. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, shaking, clutching the steering wheel. Gordon used to threaten me with private investigators if I ever tried to claim my mother's inheritance. Was this him? Had he found out about the coin? Or was it the old man I ran up the stairs to my apartment, double-locked the door, and pushed a chair under the handle? My phone pinged. I jumped, nearly dropping my keys. It was an email notification. I didn't give my email out. Only my school and my employer had it. I opened the app. The sender field was blank. No name, no address, just a string of encrypted characters. The subject line was simple. Paisley, bring the metal piece. I opened the email. There was no body text, just a date and a time: Friday, November 28th, 2:00 p.m., and an address, the Ward Crow Building, Suite 400. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the metal coin on my desk. This wasn't a crazy old man. This wasn't a coincidence. The game had started, and I had just been dealt my first hand. The lobby of Ward and Crow was not designed for people who buy their dinner from a vending machine. It was a cathedral of glass, polished marble, and aggressive silence. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that suggested preservation, and the receptionist looked at my scuffed sneakers with the polite disdain of a flight attendant informing you that the economy cabin is full. I walked up to the desk, clutching the heavy metal medallion in my pocket so hard my knuckles turned white. I have an appointment, I said. 2 o'clock? Paisley Flores? The receptionist didn't check a computer. She didn't check a ledger. She simply nodded, as if she had been waiting for me to walk through those doors since the moment I was born. Ms. Ward is expecting you in the boardroom, 42nd floor. The elevator on the far left is unlocked for you. The elevator ride was smooth enough to be unsettling. When the doors slid open, I wasn't greeted by a bustling office. I was greeted by a single woman standing at the end of a long, minimalist hallway. Elise Ward did not look like the kind of lawyer you see on billboards next to the highway. She looked like the kind of lawyer who drafts treaties for small countries. She was tall, wearing a suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life, and her hair was pulled back so severely it pulled her features into a sharp, predatory focus. She didn't smile. She didn't offer me coffee. She simply opened a door and gestured for me to enter. "Sit," she said. It wasn't a suggestion. The boardroom was vast, dominated by a table long enough to land a plane on. I sat. Elise sat directly across from me. There were no stacks of paper, no messy files, just a single tablet and a digital recorder. "You brought the token," she stated. I pulled the metal disc from my pocket and placed it on the mahogany table. It made a heavy, dull thud. "Good," she said. "That saves us about 30 minutes of verification protocols. Who is he?" I asked. My voice sounded small in the large room. "The man at the bus station. You said his name is Harlan Caldwell, but that doesn't make sense." Elise looked at me, her eyes cool and assessing. "It makes perfect sense, Ms. Flores. You just have not had access to the full picture. Harlan Caldwell is the majority shareholder of the Caldwell Meridian Group. He is one of the largest private landowners in the Midwest, and, as I suspect you are beginning to realize, he is your grandfather." I felt the blood drain from my face. Hearing it out loud was different than suspecting it in the dark of my apartment. "My mother told me her family was dead," I said. "She said they were poor. She said they abandoned her because she married my father." "Half of that is true," Elise said. She tapped the table, a rhythmic, impatient sound. "Your mother, Elena, was Harlan's only daughter. She was not abandoned because she was poor. She was disowned because she refused to be controlled. She married a man Harlan disapproved of your father, and when that marriage failed and she married Gordon Bale, the estrangement became permanent. Harlan is a man of extreme pride. He cut her off to teach her a lesson. He expected her to come back." "She died," I whispered. "She died in a county hospital because we couldn't afford a specialist. Where was his pride then?" "He didn't know," Elise said. For the first time, her voice lost its robotic edge. "Gordon Bale ensured that the notices of her illness never reached New York. By the time Harlan found out she was gone, she had been buried for 3 months. I stared at her. The room seemed to tilt. Gordon had blocked my mother from reaching out to her own father. "Why am I here?" I asked. "If he hated her enough to let her go, why does he want to see me now?" "He is dying, Paisley," Elise said bluntly. "Not today, and perhaps not tomorrow, but he has been diagnosed with a degenerative condition. It clarifies the mind. He is currently updating his living will and restructuring the Caldwell Family Trust. He wants to reinstate the line of succession." She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a single page, dense with text. "However," Elise continued, "there is significant opposition. There are other board members, and distant cousins, who have been waiting for Harlan to die so they can carve up the empire. They do not want a long-lost granddaughter appearing out of the mist, and they certainly do not want you to have the voting power that comes with your mother's shares. So he wants to give me money. He wants to give you a choice," Elise corrected. "But before we can proceed to the specifics of the trust, we need to handle the unpleasant procedural matters. I need you to sign an identity affidavit, and I need a DNA sample." I recoiled. "A DNA sample? You don't believe me." "I believe you," Elise said. "The token proves you met him. Your face proves who you are, but the law does not care about my belief. If we are going to go to war, and make no mistake, Ms. Flores, we are going to war, we need irrefutable proof that you are Elena Caldwell's daughter. We cannot give the opposition an inch of ground to stand on. She produced a sealed plastic packet containing a cotton swab. It felt humiliating. I was sitting in a skyscraper, being asked to prove I wasn't a con artist, all because I gave a sandwich to an old man. But I looked at Elise's face. She wasn't mocking me. She was arming me. "Fine," I said. I took the swab. "Do it." After the formalities were done, Elise leaned back. "There is one more thing. You need to be very careful about who you talk to. Specifically, Gordon Bale." "Gordon doesn't know anything," I said. "He thinks I'm a failure." "Gordon knows something is happening," Elise said. "We have detected inquiries into the trust's status from a lawyer in Ohio who represents him. He smells money, Paisley, and a predator who smells blood is dangerous," as if summoned by her words. My phone buzzed on the table. I looked at the screen. "Gordon." I froze. "Answer it," Elise said softly. "Put it on speaker. Do not agree to anything." I swiped the green icon. "Hello." "Paisley." Gordon's voice filled the boardroom. It was rich, warm, and dripping with a fake affection that made my skin crawl. "How are you, sweetheart?" "We haven't heard from you in weeks." I looked at Elise. She remained impassive, gesturing for me to continue. "I'm busy." "Gordon," I said. "I have exams." I know. You are always working so hard," he said. "Listen, Maris and I were talking, and we feel terrible about how things were left. We want you to come over for dinner tonight. Maris is making her roast chicken. We just want to catch up, talk about the future, maybe help you with some of those tuition bills." My stomach turned. He hadn't offered to help with a bill in 5 years. "I can't," I said. "I have a shift." "Call in sick," Gordon pressed. The warmth in his voice fractured just a little. "It is important. Paisley, we need to discuss some family matters. Papers that need tidying up regarding your mother's old accounts. It is for your benefit." Papers. He wanted me to sign something. "I'm not signing anything, Gordon," I said. Silence on the other end. Cold, heavy silence. "You are sounding very ungrateful." "Paisley," Gordon said, his voice dropping to a flat, dangerous monotone. "Don't forget who put a roof over your head. Don't forget that you are alone out there. Come to dinner. Don't make this difficult." "I'm not coming," I said, and then, before my courage could fail, I hung up. I looked at Elise. She nodded. "Once. He is scared. He is trying to get you back under his roof so he can bully you into signing a waiver. If you had gone there tonight, you would not have left without signing away your rights to the Caldwell estate." "I need to go home," I said. Standing up, I felt suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. "Go straight home," Elise instructed. "If anyone approaches you, do not engage. If you receive any documents, bring them to me. Do not sign a receipt, a delivery slip, or a birthday card without reading it 3 times. And Paisley." I turned at the door. "Record everything," she said. "In this state, as long as one party consents to the recording, it is legal. You are that party. Be your own witness." I left the building and took the bus back to my neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the street. When I walked into the lobby of my apartment building, my landlady, Mrs. Gable, was sweeping the floor. She was a nice woman who usually ignored me, but today she stopped and leaned on her broom. "Paisley," she called out. "Popular girl today." "What do you mean?" I asked, my hand tightening on my keys. "Had a man here about an hour ago," she said. "Nice suit, blue, asked me about your schedule, wanted to know when you come and go, if you have guests, that sort of thing." "What did you tell him?" I asked, my heart hammering. "I told him I'm not a secretary," she grunted. "But he was persistent, said he was an old friend of your father's, left his card." She handed me a business card. It was white, simple text, Bale Associates, Consulting. It was Gordon's consulting firm. He wasn't just calling, he was hunting. He was building a timeline of my movements. I went up to my apartment and locked the door. I checked the window locks. I checked the closet. I felt like a fugitive in my own home. I sat on the floor, my back against the radiator, and stared at the phone. At midnight, it buzzed again. I flinched. If it was Gordon again, I was going to scream. But it wasn't Gordon. It was Landon. Sender Landon. Text. They are freaking out. Gordon has been on the phone with his lawyer all night. He's tearing the study apart looking for Mom's old files. I heard him say Caldwell, an injunction. I don't know what you did. Pays. But watch your back. He's cornered. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Landon was alive. Landon was watching. And for the first time, Landon was warning me. Gordon was cornered. And a cornered animal bites. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like footsteps. Every car passing outside sounded like a black sedan. The next morning, a Saturday, I woke up to a rhythmic tapping on my door. I grabbed my phone, set it to record, and crept to the peephole. It was a courier, not the same one from before. This one was younger, wearing a generic delivery uniform. "Delivery for Paisley Flores," he called out. I opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "Slide it through." He frowned but slid a large, stiff envelope through the gap. "Need a signature." "No signature," I said. "Leave it or take it." He shrugged, marked something on his device, and left. I closed the door and picked up the envelope. It was heavy cardstock, expensive, textured. It wasn't a legal summons. I tore it open. Inside was an invitation, gold leaf lettering on black velvet paper. "You are cordially invited to the annual Ashford Ridge Charity Gala, benefiting the Elena Flores Memorial Fund." My stomach twisted. They were holding the gala. The gala Gordon was using to launder his reputation using my mother's name. I scanned down the list of patrons. Honorary patron Mr. Gordon Bale. And then, right below it, in smaller, unassuming text that hit me like a physical blow, Platinum Sponsor Anonymous, the Caldwell Trust. I stared at the paper. Harlan Caldwell wasn't just fighting Gordon in the shadows. He was coming to Gordon's party. He had bought his way onto the donor list of the very scam Gordon was running. Gordon thought he was the shark in the water. He had no idea he was swimming with a leviathan. I looked at the bottom of the card. There was a handwritten note in the margin, in that familiar, shaky script. "The car will pick you up at 7. Wear something that makes you feel dangerous." I lowered the card. The fear in my chest began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I wasn't just going to a party. I was going to an execution. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't the one on the block. The next 48 hours were a blur of paper, caffeine, and the kind of cold, quiet rage that settles in your marrow and refuses to leave. I spent more time in the conference room of Ward and Crow than I did in my own apartment. The view from the 42nd floor was spectacular, a sprawling vista of the city skyline, but I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at the autopsy of my mother's life, laid out in black and white on the mahogany table. Elise Ward was surgical in her approach. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered evidence. She treated the past not as a tragedy, but as a crime scene that needed to be reconstructed. "Look at this," Elise said, sliding a document toward me. It was a photocopy of a legal waiver, dated 5 years ago. "This is the document Gordon Bale provided to the Caldwell attorneys shortly after your mother passed. It is titled, 'A Voluntary Renunciation of Claim.'" I picked up the paper. The legal jargon was dense, but the intent was clear. It stated that Elena Flores Bale, being of sound mind and body, voluntarily forfeited any and all claims to the Caldwell Family Trust, past, present, and future, in exchange for a one-time settlement of $10,000. $10,000, I repeated, my voice flat. That's what she sold her birthright for. "Look at the date. Paisley," Elise said. I scanned the top right corner. October 14th. My hand froze. "That's impossible." "Tell me why," Elise urged. "October 14th was 3 days before she went into the coma," I said, the memory hitting me like a physical blow. "She was in the ICU. She was on a ventilator. She wasn't of sound mind and body. She couldn't even hold a pen." I looked down at the signature at the bottom of the page. It read, Elena Flores Bale. But the handwriting was wrong. It was too smooth, too steady. My mother's handwriting in those final weeks had been a jagged scrawl, tremors racking her body from the pain medication. This signature looked practiced. It looked like someone trying to draw her name, rather than write it. It is a forgery, Elise stated, or, at best, a signature coerced from a woman who was medicated beyond the capacity for consent. Gordon presented this to the estate lawyers, who were all too happy to close the file and move on. He took the $10,000, and he made sure the door to the family vault was locked from the outside. He sold her out for $10,000, I whispered. He didn't even pay for her funeral with it. I paid for the flowers. I paid for the casket, out of my college savings. He didn't just sell her out, Elise said, pulling another file. He erased her, and by erasing her, he erased you, because if she renounced her claim, the line of succession breaks. You become a legal stranger to the Caldwell fortune. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just greed. It was a systematic dismantling of my identity. I need to check something, I said, standing up abruptly. I need to go home. I drove back to my apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. When I got inside, I went straight to the shoebox I kept under my bed. It was the only box of real things I had. Everything else was temporary, but this box held the debris of the life I had before Gordon. I pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was cheap, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $2. But it was the only diary my mother had kept. I turned the pages, past the grocery lists and the mundane reminders, to the very end. The entries stopped abruptly in September, a month before she died. But tucked into the back pocket of the cover was a loose leaf of paper, folded into a tiny square. I unfolded it. The handwriting was barely legible, a spiderweb of ink from a hand that was failing. Paisley, if you read this, don't trust Gordon. He asks about the papers. He asks about the name. He says he wants to help, but his eyes are hungry. Hide the ring. Don't let him take the ring. The ring. I dug deeper into the shoebox. At the bottom, wrapped in a tissue, was a stack of old photographs. I shuffled through them until I found it. A picture of my mother from before she met Gordon, maybe 20 years ago. She was laughing, holding an ice cream cone, her head thrown back, and on her finger was a ring. Not a wedding ring, a signet ring. I held the photo up to the light. It was grainy, but the shape was unmistakable. It was a heavy band with a flat, circular face, and engraved on the face was a compass needle intertwined with the letter C. It was identical to the token Harlan Caldwell had given me at the bus station. She had one, I whispered to the empty room. She had the token. I remembered the pawn shop receipt the lawyer had given me in the first envelope. Gordon had pawned a silver locket. But had he found the ring, or had she hidden it so well that even he couldn't find it? I took a picture of the photo and texted it to Elise. Text. She had the signet, and she warned me about him. Elise replied instantly. Text. Bring it in. We are building the timeline. And Paisley. We found the money. I drove back to the city. When I walked into the conference room, Elise was standing by a whiteboard covered in flowcharts. You are studying to be an accountant, Elise said. Tell me what you see here. She pointed to a diagram of Gordon's finances. This is the Elena Flores Memorial Fund, Elise said, tapping a circle in the center. It is a 501c3 registered nonprofit. On the surface, it collects donations to help underprivileged youth in Ashford Ridge. Last year, they raised $150,000. That's not a huge amount, I said, squinting at the numbers. But for a local charity, it is decent. Now look at the expenditures, Elise said. I stepped closer. I scanned the lines: venue rental, catering, marketing, and then, the biggest slice of the pie chart, administrative consulting. 70% of the funds go to administrative consulting. I asked, that is insane. The legal limit for overhead is usually much lower before the IRS gets suspicious. And look who the consultant is, Elise said. I looked at the vendor name, Bale Strategic Solutions. Gordon, I said. He is paying himself. He is paying himself to run a charity named after the woman he robbed, Elise said, her voice hard. He takes donations from the community, funnels 70 cents of every dollar into his own consulting firm as a management fee, and uses the rest to throw parties where he can solicit more donations. It is a washing machine. Paisley. He is washing his reputation and filling his pockets at the same time. And the reason he filed for control of legacy assets? I asked, putting the pieces together. Because he needs to control the narrative, Elise said. If you, the real daughter, were to ever step forward and question where the money was going, or question the validity of the waiver, his little house of cards would collapse. He needs to hold the rights to your mother's name to keep the scam running. My phone buzzed. It was Landon again. I hesitated. It's Landon. Open it, Elise said. It was an image message. The quality was poor, taken in low light, likely with a shaking hand. It was the interior of a safe, stacks of cash, some jewelry boxes, and a thick manila folder lying on the bottom shelf. The label on the folder was handwritten in Gordon's script, Caldwell Settlement Options. Below the image, Landon had sent a text. Text. He left the study door open. He is drunk. He keeps shouting about how he handled it 10 years ago. He says he has an insurance policy. I think this file is it. Settlement options. Elise read over my shoulder. That implies there was more than just the waiver. That implies there was a negotiation. What does that mean? It means Harlan Caldwell might have tried to reach out before, Elise said, her eyes narrowing. Or the estate lawyers offered something substantial to make your mother go away, and Gordon intercepted it. If that file contains a settlement offer that was hidden from your mother, that is fraud on a federal level. That is prison time. So we have him, I said, feeling a surge of triumph. We take this to the police. Not yet, Elise said. She turned away from the board and looked out the window. The police take months. Investigations are slow. And Gordon is a man who knows how to shred documents. If we tip our hand now, that file in the safe disappears. He will claim the charity is just mismanagement, pay a fine, and walk away. Then what do we do? Elise turned back to me. Her expression was terrifyingly calm. We let him hang himself. We need him to admit, publicly, that he has control over your mother's legacy. We need him to assert his authority over you in front of witnesses. We need to lure him into a trap where he feels so safe, so powerful, that he boasts about the very things that will destroy him. The gala, I said. The gala. Elise agreed, as if on cue. My email pinged. I opened it. It was from the official account of the Ashford Ridge Civic Association. Subject: urgent request for Ms. Paisley Flores. Dear Paisley, on behalf of your stepfather, Mr. Gordon Bale, and the organizing committee, we would be honored if you would stand with the family on stage this Saturday night. Gordon believes it would be a powerful moment of healing for you to say a few words about the great work the foundation is doing in your mother's name. We have prepared a brief script for you to review, just to ensure the messaging aligns with our donor goals. I opened the attachment. The script was a page of vomit-inducing lies. I want to thank my father, Gordon, for being the rock of this family, for saving my mother's memory, for supporting me when I was lost. He wants me to read a script, I said, showing the tablet to Elise. He wants me to go on stage and tell everyone that he is a saint and I am a charity case. Of course he does, Elise said. He knows the rumors are starting. He knows about the summons. He needs to parade you out there like a tamed animal to show the world that he still holds the leash. If you read that speech, you are publicly validating his control over the estate. It could be used in court to argue that you accepted his guardianship. So I refuse? No, Elise said. A small, cold smile touched her lips. You accept. You tell him you are honored. You tell him you will read every word he wrote. But you accept the invitation, Elise interrupted. You walk onto that stage. You let him introduce you. You let him think he has won. And then, when the microphone is live and the cameras are rolling. I go off script, I finished. You burn it down, Elise corrected. But you do it with facts. You do it with the poise of a Caldwell. She walked over to the table and picked up the invite I had received earlier, the black velvet card with the Caldwell Trust sponsor listing. Harlan will be there, Elise said. He will not be in the front row. He will be watching from the shadows. He wants to see if you have the stomach for this. He wants to see if you are a victim, or if you are his granddaughter. I looked at the script on the screen, the words that were designed to humiliate me. Then I looked at the photo of my mother with the ring, laughing before the world broke her. I'll do it, I said. Elise nodded. She gathered the files, the fake waiver, the charity financials, the photo of the safe, and slid them into a leather briefcase. Gordon thinks his enemy is a broke girl who works the night shift, Elise said softly. He thinks his enemy is a stepdaughter he can bully. She looked me dead in the eye. They aren't afraid of you being poor, Paisley. They are afraid of you being returned to your right name, because a Flores is a girl they can pity. But a Caldwell is someone they answer to. I walked out of the office and into the cool evening air. I took the bus home, but the ride felt different this time. I wasn't just a passenger. I was a soldier moving into position. I spent the night memorizing the financial figures of the charity. I memorized the dates of the forged waiver. I memorized the lies in Gordon's script. When Saturday came, I wouldn't need a teleprompter. I would have the truth. And for Gordon Bale, the truth was going to be fatal. The dress was black. It was not the kind of black that mourns. It was the kind of black that hunts. Elise Ward had it sent to my apartment at 4 o'clock that afternoon, along with a pair of heels that were sharp enough to be considered concealed weapons. There was no note, just a tag that read, Ward & Crow Client Expenses. I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. For the first time in 5 years, I did not look like the girl who stocked shelves on the night shift. I did not look like the girl who counted pennies for instant noodles. I looked like a stranger. I looked dangerous. The car arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. It was a town car, sleek and silent, a stark contrast to the rusted pickup trucks and sedans parked along my street. When I stepped out of the vehicle in front of the Ashford Ridge Civic Hall, the air was cold, but my skin felt hot. The Civic Hall was the crown jewel of our small town's pretensions. It was a brick building from the 50s that had been renovated with too much glass and not enough taste. Tonight, it was lit up with purple and gold spotlights, the colors of the Elena Flores Memorial Fund. My mother's name was plastered on a banner above the entrance, twisting in the wind. Seeing it made my stomach turn, but I kept my face smooth. I walked up the steps. I could see them inside through the glass doors, the local elite, the car dealership owners, the real estate developers, the politicians who needed Gordon's fundraising clout, and in the center of it all, holding court, was Gordon Bale. He was wearing a tuxedo that strained slightly at the buttons, a purple rosette pinned to his lapel that read, Founder. He was laughing, his head thrown back, one hand gripping the shoulder of the mayor. He looked like a man who owned the world. I pushed through the doors. The noise hit me first, a wall of chatter and the clinking of glasses, then the smell of expensive cologne and cheap catering. I took 3 steps into the room and stopped. I let myself be seen. It took about 10 seconds for the ripple to spread. People turned, whispering. They didn't recognize me at first. They were used to seeing Paisley the servant, Paisley the shadow. They were not ready for this. Gordon turned. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face, before he plastered the grin back on. It was a predator's grin. He excused himself from the mayor and walked toward me, his arms spread wide. Maris was right behind him. She was wearing a silver gown that looked like tinfoil, her face pulled tight with makeup and tension. Paisley, Gordon boomed, his voice carrying over the crowd. You made it. We were worried you might get lost. He reached for me, clearly intending to pull me into a hug for the benefit of the room. I didn't step back, but I didn't move forward. I just stood there, my hands clasped loosely in front of me, radiating a chill that froze him a foot away. Gordon dropped his arms. clearing his throat. "Look at you," Maris said, her voice shrill. She stepped into my personal space, her eyes scanning my dress with undisguised jealousy. She turned to a group of women standing nearby, the wives of the town council. "Can you believe it? We try so hard with her. She was such a difficult teenager, always running away, always so ungrateful. But Gordon and I, we have hearts of gold. We just couldn't turn our backs on her, even after everything she did." She said it loud enough for the back of the room to hear. It was the narrative they had spun for years. I was the troubled, unstable stepdaughter, and they were the saints who tolerated me. "It is good to see you clean," Maris added, patting my arm with a touch that felt like a sting. "Gordon paid for the dress. I assume you really must thank him publicly later." I didn't say a word. I just looked at her hand on my arm until she pulled it away, unsettled by my silence. Elise had coached me well. Silence makes people nervous. They will fill it with their own guilt. Come," Gordon said, guiding me by the elbow. His grip was tight, painful. "There are people you need to meet, important people." He marched me toward the center of the room, toward the mayor and a few board members of the charity. "Mr. Mayor," Gordon said, beaming, "I want you to meet someone." The mayor, a balding man with a kind but vacant face, smiled at me. "Ah, is this the daughter? The one whose mother inspired all this?" Gordon's grip tightened on my arm. He laughed, a dismissive, barking sound. No, Gordon said quickly. "This is Paisley. She's a friend of the family. We let her stay in the house for a few years out of kindness. She is just here to observe." It was a slap in the face, a public erasure. He couldn't bring himself to admit I was Elena's daughter because that would remind people that he wasn't a blood relative. He needed to be the primary connection to the tragedy. The mayor looked confused for a moment, then nodded. "Ah, well, nice to meet you. Miss, wonderful party your, friends have thrown." I looked at Gordon. His eyes were hard, daring me to speak, daring me to cause a scene. I smiled. It was a small, cold thing. I nodded at the mayor and said nothing. Gordon relaxed slightly. He thought he had won. He thought I was cowed. "Excellent," Gordon said. "Now, Paisley, if you could just step over here. We have a little administrative matter to handle before the speeches." He steered me away from the crowd, toward a small table near the side of the stage. A photographer was positioned there, waiting. On the table sat a single document and a gold pen. My heart began to hammer, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. This was the trap. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was calm, contrasting with the noise of the party. "It is an opportunity," Gordon said, his voice dropping to a low hiss. He picked up the pen and held it out to me. "Maris and I have been talking. We want to help you get back on your feet. This document authorizes the foundation to pay off your student loans, every cent. Tonight?" He smiled, but his eyes were dead. "All you have to do is sign this acknowledgement. It just says that you agree the foundation is being managed correctly and that you have no further claims on the estate assets. It is just a formality to release the funds." I looked at the paper. It wasn't a receipt. It was a comprehensive waiver. I, Paisley Flores, hereby irrevocably release Gordon Bale and all associated entities from any liability regarding the estate of Elena Flores. It was the same trick he had used on my mother, a bribe wrapped in a lie. "I can't sign this, Gordon," I said. Gordon's smile twitched. "What do you mean, you can't? It is $40,000. Paisley, you make minimum wage. This is a winning lottery ticket." "It is a waiver," I said, raising my voice just a fraction. "You want me to sign away my mother's legacy for the price of my tuition?" "Lower your voice," Gordon snapped. He leaned in, his breath smelling of scotch and mints. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little leech. I am offering you a way out. You sign this paper, take the check, and disappear. Or you walk out of here with nothing, and I make sure you lose that job at the grocery store by Monday morning. I know the owner. I own his debt. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a promise, Gordon sneered. Now pick up the pen. The photographer is waiting. Smile. I looked around. People were watching. They saw Gordon leaning over me, his face red, his body language aggressive. They saw the friend of the family looking calm while the philanthropist looked like a bully. No, I said clearly. Gordon snapped. The mask fell completely. You stupid girl, he shouted. The music seemed to stop. The room went silent. I am trying to save you. Sign the damn paper or get the hell out of my hall. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, trying to force the pen into my hand. That was the mistake. Before I could even pull away, a shadow detached itself from the wall behind me. A hand, large and gloved, clamped down on Gordon's shoulder. It wasn't a friendly touch. It was a vice grip. Sir, a deep voice rumbled. Release the guest. Gordon spun around, shocked. Standing there was a man I had seen earlier by the entrance, the head of event security. But he wasn't looking at Gordon like an employee. He was looking at him like a bouncer looking at a drunk. Who the hell are you? Gordon demanded, trying to shrug off the hand. I am the organizer of this event. I hired you. My name is Miles Keene, the man said calmly. He didn't let go. And actually, you didn't hire me. The venue contract stipulates independent security oversight for events over 500 people. My contract is with the building. Miles stepped between me and Gordon, using his broad shoulders to create a wall. Ms. Flores is a verified guest with a valid invitation, Miles continued, his voice projecting easily to the silent room. You are creating a disturbance, Mr. Bale. If you touch her again, I will have to escort you off the premises. The crowd gasped. A few phones were raised. Recording. Gordon turned purple. You work for me. Get out of my way. This girl is trespassing. She is not trespassing, Miles said. She is standing her ground. Maris rushed over, grabbing Gordon's arm. Gordon, stop. Everyone is watching. Gordon looked around. He saw the faces of the donors. He saw the mayor frowning. He realized, too late, that he had just played the villain in his own play. He smoothed his jacket, his hands shaking with rage. Fine, Gordon spat, backing away. Fine, let her stay. Let everyone see what a charity case looks like. He marched up the stairs to the stage, grabbing the microphone. He needed to regain control. He needed to get the spotlight back on his narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, Gordon bellowed, the feedback screeching. Apologies for the interruption. Empathies run high when we deal with troubled souls. But let us focus on why we are here, the future. He gestured to the massive projection screen behind him. We have had a record-breaking year, and tonight I am thrilled to announce a surprise that will change the face of this foundation forever. A donor who believes in my vision so much. They have pledged a matching grant for every dollar we raise tonight. Gordon signaled to the technician, Let us reveal our platinum sponsor. He looked at me with a triumphant sneer. He thought it was one of his cronies. He thought he had lined up a fake donor to boost the numbers. The lights dimmed. The drumroll sound effect played over the speakers. I watched Gordon. I wanted to remember his face in this exact moment. The screen flickered. And then, huge white letters appeared against a black background. It wasn't a local bank. It wasn't a real estate firm. The text read, The Caldwell Family Trust, represented by Harlan Caldwell. The room went dead silent. Gordon froze. He stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He knew that name. He feared that name. Then, a second line of text faded in below it. Pending audit of administrative allocation. A murmur rippled through the crowd like a wave. Pending audit. That wasn't a donation. That was a threat. Gordon turned to the technician, waving his hands frantically. Cut it. Cut the feed. That is a mistake. But the technician was shrugging, pointing at his console, which seemed to be locked. I stood in the center of the room, next to Miles. I looked up at the stage where Gordon Bale was shrinking under the weight of a name he thought was buried. The friend of the family was gone. The Caldwell had arrived. The silence in the Ashford Ridge Civic Hall was not the respectful silence of a captivated audience. It was the suffocating, vacuum-sealed silence of a room full of people realizing they were witnessing a disaster. The words "pending audit" glowed on the massive projection screen like a neon indictment, casting a harsh blue light over Gordon Bale's sweating face. Gordon stood frozen at the podium, his hand hovering over the microphone as if it were a live grenade. He blinked rapidly, his eyes darting from the screen to the audience, his brain desperately trying to find the spin, the lie, the escape route. "Technical difficulties," Gordon stammered, his voice cracking. He forced a laugh that sounded like dry wood snapping. "We seem to have crossed wires with another presentation. If the tech booth could just—" "It is not a technical difficulty, Mr. Bale." The voice cut through the room, clear and authoritative. It did not come from the stage. It came from the double doors at the side of the hall. Elise Ward walked into the room. She was flanked by a man who looked like he was carved out of beige stone spectacles, thinning hair, carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain bricks. He was an auditor, a creature of pure math and zero mercy. Elise did not look at me. She walked straight toward the stage, her heels clicking a rhythmic countdown on the hardwood floor. "I am Elise Ward, legal counsel for the Caldwell Family Trust," she announced, not shouting, but projecting with a courtroom resonance. "And this is Mr. Arthur Vance, independent forensic auditor. We are here to formally present the grant confirmation letter for the donation you just announced." Gordon's face went from red to the color of old ash. He gripped the podium. "This is a private event. You cannot just barge in here." "You just publicly announced a partnership with my client," Elise said, stopping at the foot of the stage. She held up a document. "Under the bylaws of the Caldwell Trust, and under the state regulations regarding charitable matching grants, any organization accepting Caldwell funds consents to an immediate, third-party financial review to ensure compliance. We are here to begin that review. Tonight." The room erupted in whispers. The donors, the local business owners, the mayor, they all knew what financial review meant. It meant open books. It meant nowhere to hide. Gordon leaned into the microphone, his composure disintegrating. "Security, get them out. This is harassment." But Miles Keene, the head of security who was standing next to me, didn't move toward Elise. He crossed his arms over his chest and stared at Gordon. "They are identifying themselves as legal representatives. Sir, I cannot remove them without cause." That was when the first flash went off. It came from the front row. Jenna Maris, a reporter for the Ashford Gazette, who usually covered bake sales and zoning meetings, was standing on her chair. She had been tipped off, I suspected, by Elise, and she looked like a shark that had just smelled chum in the water. "Mr. Bale," Jenna shouted, her voice shrill but piercing. "Jenna Maris, for the Gazette. Is it true that the Elena Flores Memorial Fund pays 70% of its revenue to your own consulting firm?" Gordon flinched as if she had thrown a rock at him. "That is absurd. Who told you that?" "We have copies of your tax filings." "Gordon," Jenna pressed, holding up her phone, which was clearly recording. "And why did you claim the Caldwell family had no interest in Ms. Flores's estate when their lawyer is standing right here?" "This is a setup," Gordon roared. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "It is her, that ungrateful girl. She is lying to get money. She is jealous because we cut her off." Maris Bale, my stepmother, decided this was her moment to save the sinking ship. She rushed to the edge of the stage, her silver dress shimmering under the lights, looking like a desperate beauty queen. "Please," Maris shouted, putting a hand on her chest. "Everyone, please, Paisley is a troubled young woman. We have tried to help her, but she has a history of fabrication. She is making this up to hurt us because we wouldn't give her cash for her habits." She let the word habits hang in the air, implying drugs, implying addiction. It was a low, dirty tactic, and 5 years ago, it would have made me cry. Today, I just looked at Elise. Elise nodded. She pulled a small digital device from her pocket and held it up to the microphone stand that had been set up for the audience questions. "Regarding the character of Ms. Flores," Elise said coolly, "and the intentions of Mr. Bale, I think the room should hear this. It was recorded 3 days ago. During a phone call Mr. Bale made to my client. She pressed play. The sound quality was crystal clear. It boomed through the high-end speakers of the Civic Hall. Paisley, listen to me. You are nobody without us. It was Gordon's voice, unmistakable, arrogant. You sign that waiver, or I will make sure you never work in this town again. I don't care about your mother's memory. I care about the house. I care about the assets. You think I kept you around because I liked you. I kept you around because I needed a signature. Once you sign, I will terminate you from this family so fast your head will spin. I will leave you to rot. The recording ended with a sharp click. The silence that followed was absolute. The mayor looked at his shoes. The wealthy donors who had been shaking Gordon's hand an hour ago were now physically backing away from the stage. Gordon stood there, stripped naked in front of the people he had spent 5 years trying to impress. The philanthropist mask was gone, revealing the petty, cruel tyrant underneath. That is doctored, Gordon gasped. He looked frantic, his eyes wild. AI. It is AI. They can fake voices now. It is authenticated, Elise said, slapping a folder onto the stage floor, notarized by a forensic audio specialist, and we have the call logs. Maris was shaking her head violently. No, you are lying. You are all lying. She turned to the crowd, her eyes pleading. We are good people. We took her in. And then, movement caught my eye at the main table. Landon Bale stood up. He had been sitting there with his head in his hands for the entire spectacle. He looked pale, sickly. He was the son who had always followed orders, the son who had kept his head down to avoid Gordon's wrath. Landon, Gordon said, spotting him. Landon, tell them how we treated her. Landon looked at his father, then he looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, but for the first time in his life, they were steady. He picked up a champagne glass from the table, looked at it, and then set it down with a deliberate clink. I can't do it, Dad, Landon said. His voice wasn't loud, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried perfectly. Landon, sit down, Gordon hissed. Don't you dare! Landon walked out from behind the table. He didn't walk toward the stage. He walked toward me. He stopped 3 feet away, reached into his jacket pocket, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He handed it to Elise. The safe combination is 4821, Landon said, his voice trembling slightly. The files are on the bottom shelf, the ones marked settlement, the ones that prove you hid the first letter from the Caldwell lawyers 5 years ago. Landon, Gordon screamed. It was a sound of pure betrayal, a wounded animal shriek. I gave you everything, you traitor. Landon turned to face his father. You stole it, Dad. You stole it from Paisley's mom. And you made me watch. I'm done watching. I will kill you, Gordon roared. He lost it. The veneer of civilization snapped. Gordon Bale, the man of the community, launched himself off the low stage. He wasn't coming for me. He was coming for his son. His hands were clawed, his face a mask of purple rage. But he never reached Landon. Miles Keene moved with a speed that defied his size. He stepped in, intercepted Gordon's charge, and clamped a restraint hold on him that looked painful but professional. Sir, Miles shouted. Stand down, or I will detain you. Get off me, Gordon thrashed, spitting saliva. That is my son. That is my money. The room was in chaos. People were scrambling for the exits. Phones were held high. Hundreds of little glowing eyes recording the downfall of the Bale dynasty. Jenna Maris was shouting questions at Maris, who was sobbing on the stage, ruining her makeup. Elise stepped forward into the spotlight that was still illuminating the empty podium. Mr. Bale, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Please preserve your energy. You will need it. She held up a thick packet of documents with a blue cover. My firm has just filed a formal petition with the State Attorney General's office regarding charitable fraud, embezzlement, and the falsification of legal documents. This gala is now a crime scene. I suggest no one leaves the building with any documents. Gordon stopped struggling. He went limp in Miles's grip. He looked at Elise, then at Landon, and finally at me. "You," he whispered, staring at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat. "You are just a clerk. You are nothing. You think you can take me down." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had made me pay for my own existence in my own mother's house. "I didn't take you down, Gordon," I said quietly. "You did." Gordon was dragged back, not arrested yet, but contained by security until the police arrived. The gala was over. The music had stopped. The spell was broken. I stood there, feeling the adrenaline begin to drain away, leaving my knees shaking. It was done. The secret was out. The monster had been dragged into the light. My phone buzzed in my clutch purse. A single, short vibration. I pulled it out. It wasn't a text from a lawyer. It wasn't a text from Landon. It was from a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was. Sender unknown. Text: "The lab just called. The results are a 100% match. You are my blood. Paisley, you are a Caldwell. And tonight, you fought like one." I stared at the screen, tears finally blurring my vision. I wasn't Paisley Flores, the charity case. I wasn't the stepdaughter. I was the granddaughter of Harlan Caldwell, and I had just taken back my name. The adrenaline that had fueled me on the stage began to curdle into exhaustion the moment Miles Keene escorted me away from the chaos. The flashbulbs, the shouting reporters, and the image of Gordon Bale being restrained by security all faded as the heavy oak door of the private meeting room clicked shut behind me. The room was small. It was not the grand boardroom at Ward & Crowe with the panoramic views of the city. It was a functional, windowless holding room in the back of the Civic Hall, usually reserved for visiting conductors or politicians who needed 5 minutes of silence. There was a beige sofa, a coffee table with a bowl of dusty mints, and a single armchair. In that armchair sat the man who had turned my life upside down with a plastic container of pasta. Harlan Caldwell looked older than he had on the bus bench. Perhaps it was because he wasn't wearing the hat, or perhaps it was because the bright overhead lights were unforgiving to his deep wrinkles and the liver spots on his hands. He was wearing a suit, but he had loosened the tie, and a cane rested against his knee. He didn't stand up when I entered. He just watched me. His eyes were the same gray, intelligent, and terrifyingly sharp. They were eyes that had seen empires rise and fall, eyes that could appraise the value of a company or a human soul in a single glance. Elise Ward stood by the door, acting as a silent sentinel. She gave me a small nod, a signal that I was safe, but I didn't feel safe. I felt like I had walked into the cage of a lion that was too old to hunt but still strong enough to kill. "You did well," Harlan said. His voice was stronger than it had been at the station, but it still carried a rasp, the sound of a machine that was running out of oil. "You held your ground. Most people crumble when the lights hit them." I walked over to the sofa and sat down, facing him. My hands were shaking, so I clasped them in my lap to hide it. "I didn't do it for you," I said. "I did it for her." Harlan nodded slowly. "I know. If you had done it for me, I would have been disappointed." He reached for a glass of water on the table, his hand trembling slightly, a reminder of the frailty I had witnessed 3 weeks ago. He took a sip and set it down. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "Not an apology, because apologies are cheap, and I am not a man who deals in cheap things. But I owe you the truth." "You abandoned her," I said. The anger I had held back for 5 years bubbled up, hot and acidic. "You had billions of dollars. You had everything, and you let her die in a hospital room with peeling paint because she couldn't afford a specialist. You let Gordon Bale bury her in a pine box." Harlan didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He absorbed my anger as if it were data to be processed. "I did," he said. "I made a calculation. It is what I do. I calculated that if I cut off her resources, the hardship would force her to leave your father. I calculated that when that marriage failed, she would return to the fold, humbled but tougher. I thought I was teaching her a lesson in resilience. He paused, and for a second, the steel in his eyes seemed to crack. I miscalculated, he whispered. I underestimated her pride. She had my stubbornness. She would rather have starved than asked me for a dime, and by the time I realized the silence was not stubbornness, but sickness, it was too late. Gordon had built his wall around her. He looked at his hands. I did not just abandon my daughter, Paisley. I killed her with my own arrogance. I have to live with that every day. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a confession. It was the first time I had ever heard an adult admit they were wrong without adding a but at the end. Why the bus station? I asked. Why the act? It wasn't an act, Harlan said. Not entirely. I had just been discharged from the university hospital. The specialist told me my condition is progressing. I have a year, maybe 2. I walked out the back door. I didn't want the driver. I didn't want the security detail. I wanted to see if I could still exist in the world as just a man. He leaned forward slightly. I wanted to know what I looked like when the money was stripped away. And I found out. People looked through me. They looked at the coat and saw a beggar. They saw the shaking hands and saw a junkie. I was invisible. You were hypoglycemic, I said. I know the signs. I was crashing, he corrected. My blood sugar was dropping rapidly. I was disoriented. I couldn't get the vending machine to work. And my fingers were too numb to use my phone. I was sitting there, a man worth $12 billion, dying of hunger in a public station because I was too proud to beg. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. And then you sat down. You didn't look at me with disgust. You didn't look at me with pity. You looked at me with recognition. You saw a human being in distress. You gave me your water. You gave me your food. And most importantly, Paisley. You didn't make a scene. You didn't call for help or make me feel small. You helped me keep my dignity. It was just pasta, I said, feeling my face heat up. It was everything, Harlan said firmly. I have spent my life surrounded by people who would cut my throat for a percentage of my portfolio. My own board members are vultures. My distant cousins are sharks. If I had collapsed there, they would have stepped over my body to check my pockets. He tapped the cane against the floor. I didn't choose you because the DNA test came back a match. I chose you because in that moment, you showed the one quality the Caldwell family lost 2 generations ago. You have a moral compass that points true north. Elise stepped forward then, placing a folder on the table. The situation has changed. Paisley, Elise said. Her voice was professional, breaking the emotional heaviness of the moment. Tonight was a victory, but it was just the opening battle. By revealing your identity and Harlan's backing, we have kicked a hornet's nest. Gordon is finished, I said. He was humiliated. He is going to jail. Gordon is wounded, Elise corrected, and he is embarrassed. That makes him dangerous. He won't stop. His lawyer is already spinning a narrative. They will claim the recording was taken out of context. They will claim you manipulated a senile old man Harlan into funding your vendetta. They will sue for defamation. They will drag your mother's name through the mud to prove she was mentally incompetent when she didn't sign the waiver. Let them try, I said. It is not just about winning in court, Harlan said. It is about what you want your life to look like. He looked at me, his expression grave. I am offering you the keys to the kingdom. Paisley, the trust is yours. The assets are yours. You can have enough money to buy this entire town and evict Gordon Bale from the county. You can crush him. You can fund investigations that will keep him in court for the rest of his miserable life. You can destroy his reputation so thoroughly that he won't be able to get a library card. That sounds good to me, I said. Does it? Harlan asked. Because that is a fire, and fire spreads. If you go down the path of pure revenge, you become him. You become a person who uses money as a weapon. You spend your days looking for enemies and your nights checking the locks. He sat back. Or you can choose the other path. You can focus on the truth. You can restore your mother's name. You can take the foundation and actually make it do the good work it lied about doing. You can build something. But that path is harder. It means letting go of the satisfaction of watching him bleed out slowly. It means trusting the law to handle him, even if it is not as painful as you want it to be. He hurt me, I said, my voice trembling. He hurt her. He erased us. I know, Harlan said softly. And if you want to burn him, I can do it. I can destroy him in one day. I have lawyers who are trained killers in suits. I can make Gordon Bale cease to exist. He leaned in, his gray eyes locking onto mine. But do you want to live in the ashes? Because the soot never really washes off. I looked at Elise. She wasn't swaying me one way or the other. She was waiting for my command. I looked at Harlan. I saw the regret etched into his face. He had chosen the path of power and pride, and it had cost him his daughter. He was trying to save me from making the same mistake, even as he handed me the weapon. I don't want to be like him, I said finally. And I don't want to be like you were. Harlan smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, one that reached his eyes. Good, he said. That is the correct answer. He reached into his jacket pocket. The courier brought this earlier, he said. It was in the box of items Gordon pawned 5 years ago. My team recovered everything from the shop owner, who kept them in a back room because he suspected they were stolen but was too afraid of Gordon to report it. He placed a small velvet box on the table. It was old, the fabric worn at the corners. I believe this belongs to you, Harlan said. I reached out and took the box. My hands were shaking again. I knew what this was. I had seen the empty space in my mother's jewelry box for years. I had seen the receipt in the first envelope, but seeing the receipt was different from holding the reality. I opened the lid. Inside, resting on yellowing satin, was a silver locket. It was shaped like a teardrop. It wasn't expensive, maybe worth $50 at a jewelry store, but it was priceless to me. I picked it up. The metal was cold against my fingers. I found the tiny latch on the side and clicked it open. Inside were 2 tiny, hand-cut photos. One was of me as a baby, my face smeared with cake. The other was of my mother, smiling, looking tired but happy, and engraved on the inside of the lid, in microscopic script, were 3 words Paisley. My compass. I let out a sob. It was a raw, ugly sound that I couldn't hold back. Gordon had stolen this. He had taken the one thing that proved my mother loved me, the one thing she wore every single day, and he had sold it for pocket change. He hadn't just stolen an object. He had stolen my history. I clutched the locket to my chest, feeling the sharp edges dig into my skin. Thank you, I choked out. Do not thank me, Harlan said. I am just the delivery service, returning what was lost. He stood up, leaning heavily on his cane. Elise moved to help him, but he waved her off. The war starts tomorrow, Paisley, Harlan said. Gordon will wake up desperate. The press will be camped on your lawn. Your distant cousins are already booking flights to Ohio to contest the will. It is going to be loud. It is going to be messy. He walked to the door, then stopped and turned back. But you have the one thing they don't have, he said. What's that? I asked, wiping my eyes. You know what it feels like to be hungry. Harlan said, and that means you will never be full of yourself. He opened the door and walked out into the hallway, leaving me alone in the quiet room with the silver locket and the weight of $1 billion legacy resting on my shoulders. I looked at the locket one last time. My compass. I snapped it shut. I didn't need to burn Gordon Bale to the ground. I just needed to shine a light so bright that he had nowhere left to hide. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the door. I was ready for part 9. The days following the gala were not loud. They were quiet, precise, and deadly. Gordon Bale likely expected me to come screaming to his doorstep, demanding an apology or throwing stones through his windows. That is what the old Paisley would have done. That is what a victim does. But I was not a victim anymore. I was a client of Ward and Crow, and I was learning that the most effective way to dismantle a man's life is not with anger, but with paperwork. We set up a command center in one of the smaller conference rooms at Elise's firm. It looked less like a legal office and more like a war room. Whiteboards were covered in timelines, boxes of financial records, seized via emergency injunctions, lined the walls. "We are fighting on two fronts," Elise told me on Tuesday morning. She was wearing a crisp white shirt and holding a laser pointer. "Front one is the State Oversight Board. We have filed a formal complaint regarding the mismanagement of the Elena Flores Memorial Fund. That freezes his assets. He cannot move a dime out of that account without triggering a felony." She clicked the pointer, highlighting a date on the calendar. "Front 2 is the civil hearing. We are petitioning the court to annul the waiver you supposedly signed 5 years ago and to remove Gordon as the administrator of your mother's estate based on fraud and malfeasance. That happens tomorrow." "He will fight it," I said, looking at the stack of cease and desist letters Gordon's lawyer had sent us in the last 24 hours. "He will try," Elise corrected, "but he is fighting with a plastic knife against a drone strike." The door opened, and the receptionist poked her head in. "Mr. Landon Bale is here," I nodded. "Let him in." Landon looked like he hadn't slept since the gala. His eyes were bruised with fatigue, and he was wearing the same jacket he had worn on Saturday, rumpled and stained with coffee. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He was carrying a cardboard box. He walked in and set the box on the table. He didn't look at Elise. He looked at me. "I moved out," Landon said, his voice hoarse. "I can't be in that house anymore. He is losing his mind. Paisley, he's tearing the drywall down looking for microphones. He thinks the FBI is in the vents." "Thank you for the files, Landon," I said softly. "You did the right thing." "I didn't do it for you," Landon said, rubbing his face. "I did it because I found this." He reached into the box and pulled out a personnel file. It wasn't from Gordon's consulting firm. It was old, yellowed at the edges, with a logo I now recognized intimately, the Caldwell Meridian Group. "I found this in the bottom of the safe, underneath the settlement papers," Landon said. "It is an employment record from 30 years ago." I took the file. I opened it. Name Maris Vane. Position Junior Administrative Assistant. Legal Compliance Division. Termination date, August 1995. I stared at the photo stapled to the corner. It was Maris, younger, with bigger hair and less expensive makeup, but unmistakably Maris. My blood ran cold. "She worked for them," I whispered. "Maris worked for Caldwell." "Read the exit interview notes," Elise said, stepping up behind me to read over my shoulder. I scanned the handwritten notes. Employee dismissed for breach of confidentiality. Suspected of selling contact information of family members to third-party vendors. The pieces slammed together in my mind like a car crash. "She knew," I said, looking up at Elise. "Maris wasn't just some woman Gordon met at a bar. She was the leak. She knew who my mother was. She knew about the estrangement." "She was the architect," Elise said, her voice hard as flint. "She likely tracked your mother down years ago, knowing she was a disowned heiress. She met Gordon, realized he was greedy enough to be useful, and they orchestrated the whole thing. She knew exactly how the Caldwell legal department worked because she used to file their papers. She knew how to draft a waiver that would look legitimate enough to pass a lazy review." I felt sick. It wasn't just greed. It was a long con. Maris had married Gordon, moved into our house, and played the role of the wicked stepmother, all while knowing she was sitting on a gold mine she just had to keep hidden until the time was right. "This changes everything," Elise said. She took the file and handed it to her paralegal. "Scan this, every page. This proves premeditation. It moves us from simple fraud to criminal conspiracy." "Does the reporter know?" I asked. Jenna Maris, the reporter from the Gazette, had been camping out in the lobby for 2 days. She was hungry for the scoop, but Elise had kept her on a tight leash. "Jenna is preparing the story now," Elise said, "but we are giving her only the facts, no speculation, no emotional outbursts. We are giving her the tax returns, the forged waiver dates, and now, this employment record. When she prints it, it won't be a hit piece. It will be an autopsy. Gordon, however, was not staying silent. That afternoon, my phone pinged with a notification. It was a link to a video Gordon had posted on his social media channels. I clicked play. Gordon was sitting in his home office, the American flag pin crooked on his lapel. He looked sweaty and manic. "My friends," Gordon said to the camera, his voice shaking with feigned righteous indignation, "you are witnessing a tragedy. My stepdaughter, a girl I raised and fed, has been brainwashed. She has fallen under the influence of a senile old man who has lost his grip on reality. This so-called Caldwell Trust is manipulating a mentally unstable young woman to attack my reputation. I have already filed defamation suits against everyone involved. We will not let these outside agitators destroy our community." He leaned into the camera. "Paisley, if you are watching this, come home. We can get you help. You are sick, honey. You are imagining things." I turned off the phone. "He is calling me crazy," I said. "He is using the unstable female defense." "It is a classic move," Elise said, not looking up from her tablet. "He is trying to discredit the witness. He wants the judge to think you are being manipulated by Harlan." "Where is Harlan?" I asked. "Why isn't he saying anything Gordon is calling him senile?" "Harlan is doing exactly what he should be doing," Elise said. "Nothing. Every time Gordon screams on the internet, he looks more unhinged. If Harlan responds, it becomes an argument. If Harlan stays silent, Gordon is just a man shouting at a storm. Silence is power. Paisley, Harlan is letting Gordon dig his own grave." Harlan was right, but it was hard to sit there and watch Gordon lie. "We need a statement from you," Elise said, "for the steps of the courthouse tomorrow. Short, brutal, honest." I spent the next 2 hours drafting it. I wrote 10 versions. The first was angry, the second was sad, the third was defensive. "No," Elise said, crossing out lines with a red pen. "Too many adjectives. You are not explaining yourself. You are not asking for permission. You are stating a fact." We whittled it down. We cut the fat until there was nothing left but bone. "Read it," Elise commanded. I stood up, clearing my throat. "I am not here to ask for money. I am here to return a name to its rightful owner. My mother, Elena Flores, was erased by people who claimed to love her. Tomorrow, the erasure ends." Elise nodded. "Perfect. Memorize it. Say it like you are bored." That night, the night before the hearing, I couldn't stay at the office. I needed to breathe. I went back to my apartment. It felt strange to be there, in the place where I had starved, knowing that on paper, I was now worth more than the entire building. I sat on the floor with the velvet box Harlan had given me. Inside, beneath the locket, there was something else. I hadn't looked at it closely in the meeting room because the locket had consumed all my attention. I pulled it out. It was a bracelet, heavy, solid gold. It was a chain of thick links, and in the center was a plate. Engraved on the plate was the compass needle and the letter C. I recognized it immediately. 5 years ago, 2 months after the funeral. I had come home early from school and found Gordon in the kitchen with a magnifying glass. He was looking at this bracelet. He had told me it was costume jewelry, junk my mother had bought at a thrift store. "I'm going to throw this out," he had said. "It is clutter." He hadn't thrown it out. He had tried to sell it. I looked at the pawn shop receipt again. Item refused. Suspected illicit origin. The pawn shop owner hadn't taken it because it looked too expensive for a man like Gordon to own. Gordon had been forced to hide it, terrified that if he tried to sell it again, he would be arrested. So he buried it in the bottom of a box and pawned the cheap silver locket instead. He had been sitting on the proof of my heritage for 5 years. He knew. He always knew. I clasped the bracelet around my wrist. It was heavy. It felt like a shackle. But a shackle of my own choosing. It felt like armor. My phone buzzed. A text from Elise. Text. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow. You do not just receive a judgment. You receive the life they tried to murder." I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights. Somewhere across town, in the big house on the hill, Gordon Bale was likely pacing the floors, drinking scotch, and terrified of the dawn. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one afraid of the morning. I touched the cold gold on my wrist. "I'm ready," I said to the empty room. The next morning, the air in front of the county courthouse was electric. It was a gray, overcast day, typical for Ohio in November, but the crowd made it feel hot. Jenna Maris had done her job. The headline on the morning edition of the Gazette was simple and devastating: the charity charade, how the Flores Fund financed a lifestyle. There were reporters from the city, there were camera crews, and there were people from the town, people who had donated $20 here, $50 there, thinking they were helping kids. They looked angry. I stepped out of the black SUV. Elise was on my right. Miles Keene, who had been hired permanently by the trust, was on my left. I wore a navy blue suit. No jewelry except the locket and the bracelet. The cameras turned toward me like a bank of mechanical eyes. Paisley, is it true you are suing your stepfather? Paisley, what do you say to the allegations that you are mentally unstable? I walked past them. I didn't stop. I kept my eyes fixed on the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse. Gordon arrived 2 minutes later. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 2 days. His suit was rumpled. Maris was with him, wearing dark sunglasses and a scarf wrapped around her head. Trying to be invisible, Gordon saw me on the steps. He stopped. For a second, the old Gordon tried to surface. He straightened his back, sneered, and opened his mouth to say something cruel. Then he saw the bracelet on my wrist. The gold caught the flat light of the morning. His eyes widened. He recognized it. He realized that I knew everything: the pawn attempt, the hiding, the lie. He closed his mouth. He looked down. And he walked into the building, a defeated man walking to his own funeral. We entered the courtroom. It was smelling of floor wax and old wood. I sat at the plaintiff's table. Elise opened her briefcase and laid out the files. The employment record of Maris Vane, the forensic audit of the charity, the affidavit from the pawn shop owner, the forged waiver. It wasn't a fair fight. It was an execution by paper cut. I looked back at the gallery, in the back row, sitting alone, wearing a simple gray coat, was Harlan Caldwell. He caught my eye. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just nodded. Once, a slight dip of his chin. "Focus." The nod said, "Finish it." The bailiff called out. "All rise." I stood up. I felt the weight of the locket against my chest and the weight of the bracelet on my wrist. Elise leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Remember, Paisley, today isn't about the money. The money is just the score. Today is about the name." The judge walked in. The gavel banged. "Case number 492, the clerk announced. The estate of Elena Flores versus Gordon Bale. I took a breath. The trap was set. The bait was taken. And now, the steel jaws were about to snap shut. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and the stale, recycled air of 1,000 broken promises. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Gordon Bale had just given an impromptu press conference. He had told the cameras that he was rushing to a routine administrative hearing before heading to the relaunch of the Elena Flores Memorial Fund, a desperate PR move to bury the bad press from the gala under a mountain of balloons and fake smiles. He walked into the courtroom with the swagger of a man who believes his own lies. He adjusted his tie, winked at Maris, who was huddled in the back row wearing oversized sunglasses, and sat down at the defense table. He looked at me. He didn't see a threat. He saw a girl he used to send to her room without dinner. He saw a nuisance he could buy off or bully into silence. He had no idea that he was walking into a slaughterhouse. Elise Ward did not waste time with opening theatrics. She treated the law like a demolition expert treats a condemned building. She placed the explosives at the structural weak points and waited for the dust to settle. "Your Honor," Elise began, her voice cool and detached, "we are here to present evidence of systematic embezzlement, fraud, and the falsification of legal documents regarding the estate of the late Elena Flores, Gordon's lawyer." A sweaty man named Mr. Prentice, who looked like he chased ambulances for a living, jumped up. Objection. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled stepchild who has been estranged for 5 years. We have the receipts, Elise said, sliding a thick binder across the table. This is the forensic audit of the Memorial Fund. It shows that over 70% of all donations were funneled directly into Bale Strategic Solutions, a company solely owned by the defendant under the guise of consulting fees. There is no record of any consulting work being done. There are only records of Mr. Bale paying his mortgage, his country club dues, and the lease on his luxury vehicle. Gordon's face tightened. He whispered something furious to Prentice. Furthermore, Elise continued, not missing a beat, we have the sworn affidavit of Mr. Landon Bale, the defendant's son. He confirms the existence of a Caldwell settlement file that was hidden in a personal safe, concealing a previous attempt by the Caldwell family to contact the deceased. Landon is a confused young man, Gordon blurted out, ignoring the judge's glare. He has been manipulated. And finally, Elise said, dropping the bombshell, we have the employment records of Mrs. Maris Bale from 1995. She was a former administrative assistant in the Legal Compliance Division of the Caldwell Meridian Group. She was terminated for mishandling confidential family data. This proves that the defendants targeted Elena Flores with prior knowledge of her heritage. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked over at Maris. Maris shrank into her seat, pulling her scarf tighter. This is all circumstantial, Gordon shouted, standing up. It doesn't matter. The girl signed a waiver. She waived her rights. I have the contract right here. He pulled a document from his briefcase and waved it like a flag. It was the forged waiver from 5 years ago. This document, Gordon declared, his voice booming, is a voluntary renunciation of claim, signed by Elena Flores. It is legal. It is binding. Case closed. Elise didn't blink. She turned to the back of the room. I called Dr. Eris Thorne to the stand. A man in a tweed suit walked up. He was a forensic handwriting analyst. Dr. Thorne, Elise said, please tell the court your findings regarding the signature on that document. It is a simulation, Dr. Thorne stated flatly. The pressure points are wrong. It lacks the natural fluidity of a practiced signature. Furthermore, we cross-reference the date of the signature October 14th with the hospital records of the deceased. He projected a chart onto the courtroom screen. On October 14th, Elena Flores was in a medically induced coma. Her motor functions were non-existent. It would have been physically impossible for her to hold a pen, let alone sign a complex legal waiver. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Gordon looked at the paper in his hand. It wasn't a shield anymore. It was a confession. It must be a clerical error on the date, Gordon stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. She signed it before. We just filed it on the 14th. That is not what the notary stamp says, the judge noted, her voice icy. Mr. Bale, you are treading very close to perjury. Gordon looked around the room. He saw the reporters scribbling furiously. He saw the exit signs. He realized the walls were closing in. So he did what he always did when he was cornered. He attacked the victim. This is ridiculous, Gordon screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are going to take the word of a handwriting expert over a grieving husband. This girl is a liar. She is a leech. She has always been jealous of what I built. She is mentally unstable. She is just trying to scam money from a legacy she doesn't deserve. He was turning red, the veins in his neck bulging. She is a nobody. She has no standing here. She is just a sad little girl I picked off the street. That is enough. Mr. Bale, the judge warned. No, it is not enough, Gordon roared. I am the victim here. Who is backing her? Who is paying for these high-priced lawyers? It is some shadow donor, some enemy of mine. As if in answer to his question, the double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. It wasn't a bailiff. It wasn't a reporter. Harlan Caldwell walked in. He was flanked by 2 associates in dark suits, but he walked under his own power. his cane tapping a rhythmic warning on the floor tiles. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Gordon's house. The air in the room seemed to change pressure. It was the difference between a thunderstorm and a hurricane. Gordon froze. His mouth hung open. He knew that face. He had feared that face for 30 years. The judge looked over her glasses. "Is there a reason for this interruption?" "I am the shadow donor," Harlan said. His voice was gravel and steel. "And I am here to file a motion to intervene." One of the associates walked forward and placed a sealed envelope on the judge's bench. "My name is Harlan Caldwell," he announced. "I am the founder of the Caldwell Meridian Group, and I am the grandfather of the plaintiff, Paisley Flores." Gordon made a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. "No, that is impossible." "The envelope contains a certified DNA analysis," Harlan continued, ignoring Gordon completely. "It also contains the activation papers for the Caldwell Family Trust. As the primary grantor, I am formally recognizing Paisley Flores as my sole direct heir. I am also filing a cease and desist order against the Elena Flores Memorial Fund for the unauthorized use of the Caldwell family name and likeness." The judge opened the envelope. She scanned the documents. She looked at Harlan, then at me, then at Gordon. "Mr. Bale," the judge said, "it appears your authority to administer this estate has been superseded." Gordon looked at Harlan. He looked at the man who represented the kind of wealth and power Gordon could only pantomime. "You can't do this." Gordon shrieked. "I built that fund. I saved her reputation. That girl is not a Caldwell. She is nothing like you." Harlan turned slowly. He looked at Gordon with a gaze so cold it could have frozen helium. "She is not a Caldwell," Harlan repeated softly. "No," Gordon yelled, desperate to find any crack in the armor. "Look at her. She is weak. She let us walk all over her for years. She is a Flores. She doesn't have the blood." "She is not a Caldwell," Harlan said, his voice rising just enough to fill every corner of the room, "because you stole that from her." He walked toward the plaintiff's table. He walked toward me. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my heart was steady. Gordon was panting, looking between us. I raised her." "You starved her," Harlan corrected. "You took a child who had lost her mother, and you turned her into a servant in her own home. You took her history and sold it to a pawnshop." Harlan stopped in front of me. He reached into the bag his associate was holding and pulled out a metal box. It wasn't a jewelry box. It wasn't a briefcase. It was a lunchbox. A simple, rectangular metal lunchbox, identical to the cheap ones sold at the dollar store, the kind I had eaten my cold pasta out of at the bus station. But this one was different. This one was polished to a mirror shine, and engraved on the lid were two names, Elena, and below it, Paisley. The room was dead silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Harlan held the box out to me. His hands, which had shaken so violently 3 weeks ago, were steady now. 3 weeks ago, Harlan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was a man with $12 billion and not a single friend. I was sitting on a bench, dying of pride and low blood sugar, and you gave me your lunch. I reached out and took the box. It was heavy. You gave me the only thing you had," Harlan said. "You didn't ask for my name. You didn't ask for a reward. You just saw a human being in need." He placed his hand over mine, covering the box. "So today," Harlan said, looking deep into my eyes, "I am returning the favor. You gave me your lunch when I was nothing, so I'm giving you back what they took." He tapped the lid of the box. "I am giving you back your name." I opened the latch. Inside the lunchbox, there was no food. There was a stack of legal documents, title deeds, trust fund access codes, and a new birth certificate, legally amended to include the name Caldwell. I looked at Gordon. He was slumped against the table, his face gray. He realized what had just happened. He hadn't just lost the lawsuit. He had been erased. The narrative he had built for 5 years, the benevolent stepfather. The savior was gone. "Your Honor," the judge said, clearing her throat, "given the evidence presented, I am issuing an immediate temporary restraining order against Mr. Bale. I am also freezing all assets connected to the Memorial Fund and Bale Strategic Solutions, pending a criminal investigation by the District Attorney's Office. The gavel came down. Bang. It sounded like a gunshot. No, Gordon wailed. My money. That is my money. Two bailiffs moved toward him. Maris was already at the door, trying to slip out, but a police officer blocked her path. Gordon looked at me one last time. His eyes were wide, pleading. Paisley, Paisley, tell them we are family. I looked at him. I held the metal lunchbox against my chest. I felt the cool weight of the locket against my skin. Family doesn't charge you for rent, Gordon, I said quietly, and family doesn't let you starve. I turned my back on him. I walked out of the courtroom. The flashbulbs went off like fireworks, blinding white explosions. But I didn't flinch. Harlan walked beside me, his cane tapping a victory march. Elise was on my other side, already on the phone with the DA. We stepped out into the cool November air. The sky was gray, but it felt bright. I didn't cheer. I didn't jump up and down. I just closed my eyes and took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally, for the first time in 5 years, felt free. I looked at the lunchbox in my hands, the inheritance, the legacy. It wasn't about the billions. It was about the fact that tomorrow morning, I could wake up, eat a hot breakfast, and know exactly who I was. I opened my eyes and looked at the camera. If you were me, I asked, my voice steady and clear, would you have chosen to burn him down for the satisfaction, or would you have chosen to just take back your life and walk away? Tell me in the comments. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I really want to know where you guys are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe working the night shift like Paisley? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that subscribe button for Maya Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button so we can get this story out to more people who need a win today. See you in the next one.